There are some pretty involved and elaborate memory work curriculums out there in the homeschool market these days. But what if you're a homeschooler that just wants to memorize a few things and not actually make memory work the heart of your curriculum? How do you choose what to memorize? Well, that is what we are talking about in today's video. And be sure to stay until the end where I show you a fun, free resource that you can use to make memory work more enjoyable and doable in your homeschool. So one of the things that we have done almost the entire time during our homeschool is memory work. My kids are now teens, and even though they complain quite a bit about some of the things that we do in our homeschool, I'm looking at you, math and writing, they don't complain about memory work. It's still one of the things that they enjoy doing and do without complaint. And we have memorized so many things through the years. It's truly one of our favorite parts of the day. I'm Pam Barnhill, and I have taught thousands of homeschoolers how to beat burnout, create doable systems, and bring more joy to their homeschool day. And in this video, I'm going to be talking about what you can memorize in your morning basket. We're going to be covering a number of different ideas for things that you can add to your memory work. So the first thing to memorize in your morning basket is scripture. You really want to take the time to write these beautiful words onto the hearts of your children so that they will have them with them wherever they go, even if they don't have a Bible along with them. So some really great places to start are things like the Psalms and the Proverbs, or even verses from the epistles where they talk about Christian living. So things that you really want them to remember and carry with them as they go. Scripture is one of our favorite things to memorize. So another thing that my family really loves to memorize, actually maybe even our favorite thing, is poetry. Poetry is so easy because of the rhythm of the words, and so often there's some kind of rhyme involved with memorizing poetry. And you can certainly work up to these long, serious poems if you want to, but it's always best to start with really fun, enjoyable poetry. Something like The Yak by Hilaire Belloc, or Who Has Seen the Wind by Christina Rossetti. So a couple of resources for you. One of our very favorite resources is Linguistic Development Through Poetry Memorization by IEW. Actually, I think that's probably our longest used homeschool resource, is that little poetry memorization kit. And then also a couple of times a month in our Your Morning Basket Plus subscription, I lead our members through a memory palace and help them to memorize a poem in a fun, new, exciting way. So you could also check that out as well. So the third thing is Shakespeare, and so often as adults we are a little bit intimidated by Shakespeare, but I have to tell you, if you introduce your kids to Shakespeare in a fun way early on, they're simply not intimidated. They don't know that they're supposed to be intimidated by Shakespeare. So one of the things I like to do when I start memorizing Shakespeare with kids is share with them a picture book version of the plot of the play that we're going to be memorizing from. And then we start working on some well-known passage from the play. So my daughter and I, she's 16 now, we were sitting and watching a documentary this summer, and there were actually a couple of actors narrating the documentary. And at one point, the actors started quoting a passage from The Tempest. And this just happens to be a passage that we have memorized. And my daughter was just like, I know that one. And she started reciting right along with them. And it just kind of made her feel so proud. Her dad was sitting in the room. He had no idea that she knew this passage from Shakespeare. And so he was kind of impressed. And just great fun was had by all knowing this bit of Shakespeare. So where can you start with Shakespeare? Well, Sonnet 19 is a great place to start, or the St. Crispin's Day speech from Henry V. That's another one that's a lot of fun, especially for boys. Another great resource to help with this is How to Teach Your Children Shakespeare by Ken Ludwig. He really does break it down and simplify the process of sharing Shakespeare with your kids for you. Makes it so easy and doable for parents, and I'll include include a link to that resource for you. We also recorded a podcast with Ken Ludwig all about why Shakespeare memorization is good for your kids, and I'll give you a link to that as well. Okay, the next thing that's really fun to memorize is speeches. And these are great because, there's such a rich history tied up in speeches. And it's a wonderful way to really kind of dig into history by memorizing some of the speeches. So another reason to spend time memorizing speeches is so you can memorize the form of the speech. And this was a technique used by Frederick Douglass, the American abolitionist from the 1800s, and he wanted to be an effective speaker. So he memorized all of these speeches from history, not just so he would have the words of the speeches, but so he would have the form of the speeches. He really studied how these great speakers made an impact with their words. And so we're not just learning the words of the speech, which are sometimes really, really great, but we're also learning the forms of the speech as well. And so if your kids ever end up doing any public speaking, they'll kind of have a better idea of how to put together a really good speech. So a couple of places to start for this. I particularly love Martin Luther King Jr.'s I Have a Dream speech. Such an effective speech there. And then George Washington's farewell address is another one. Patrick Henry's Give Me Liberty or Give Me Death. So many different choices out there for memorizing speeches. And then finally, the last thing that you might want to choose to add to your memory work repertoire is helpful information. So we're talking about things like lists of prepositions and math formulas, skip counting. The last two have especially been effective and helpful in our homeschool. Now, I'm going to tell you, this is not where I spend the bulk of my time. I don't really spend a lot of time memorizing information, but if we find something that's going to be really helpful, like those math facts when my kids were little, we spent just a few minutes every day, and it really solidified them for my kids. Actually, all of my kids have a math tutor, and she has mentioned to me before that the skip counting we did was foundational for helping them to memorize their math facts. And so that would be something to make a little bit of time for in your day. Okay, so I have included a link for you here. You can follow this link to get our complete list of 100 things to memorize, plus a memory work download. It's a free download that you can use. It has 3 games inside that you can play with your kids to help you do memory work. And it also has some printable cards that you can use to make memory work fun in your homeschool. So I hope you go and check those out. So thank you so much for joining us for today's video on what to memorize in your morning basket. I hope you got some great ideas. And if you liked this video, be sure to hit the little bell or subscribe to be notified whenever we have a new video release.